device.
And do they have a time limit on these warrants?
There are some limitations depending on what provision we're talking about.
And what was the idea of having this be a secretive court?
Well, the FISA court predates the Patriot Act or the 9/11 attacks. That was
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, we're nearly 10 years after the attacks of September 11, 2001. Every one of us in the Senate know that America continues to face threats of terrorism. We will for the rest of our life, as do a lot of our allies. And the President's success after dogged pursuit of Osama bin Laden, success earlier this month, doesn't mean we can become complacent or less resolute. We have to remain vigilant. We have to ensure that dedicated women and men in our law enforcement and intelligence agencies have all the appropriate tools necessary to protect our nation, the American people. But as every Vermonter knows, tools are only useful if they're regularly checked and maintained. Otherwise, they become blunt instruments that can do harm rather than accomplish the job. Congress recognized this basic notion in 2001 when we first wrote the USA Patriot Act. I worked with the then Republican House Majority Leader, Dick Armey. We included sunsets on certain surveillance authorities in the bill. It was something that both of us, even though we had vastly different political philosophies, we both agreed on we had to have sunset provisions. And in 2006, when Congress reauthorized USA Patriot Act, I worked to ensure that certain sunsets were renewed and added audits on the use of powers with the potential to unnecessarily intrude on the privacy of Americans. We want America to be protected, but we don't want to give a blank check to anybody. Not to a Republican administration, not to a Democratic administration, not to anyone. We are, after all, Americans who believe in our individual liberties. Having granted the government broad authority to gather vast amounts of information about the daily lives of Americans, I wanted to do what we could to ensure that unfettered information gathering didn't occur at the expense of Americans' basic constitutional rights and their civil liberties. The sunsets and audits provide Congress an opportunity to examine whether Patriot Act tools are being used appropriately, and if not, then let's sharpen them or refine them or restrain these tools accordingly. The audits we had in 2005 and 2006 proved to be very helpful because they identified there were abuses in the way the Patriot Act was being used. The abuses were with respect to national security letters and the use of exigent letters. If we hadn't had the oversight, if we hadn't had the sunset provisions, we probably never would have found out about those abuses. But we found out about them, and we worked with the FBI to correct those matters. Now, that brings us to today. The Senate has the opportunity to re-examine, refine key Patriot Act provisions. I think we should take that opportunity to make improvements to our current law. I've led the Senate Judiciary Committee to diligently consider these matters with hearings and meetings, and as a result, the committee responded by reporting improvements both last year and again this year through bipartisan legislation. They're good measures, and we've worked to ensure that they would not compromise the effectiveness of our law enforcement and intelligence capabilities. In fact, much of the language was derived after consultation not only with the administration, but all within it, including the intelligence community. The Attorney General and others have repeatedly assured us that the measures to enhance oversight and accountability, such as audits, public reporting, would not sacrifice, and to quote him, the operational effectiveness and flexibility needed to protect our citizens from terrorism. He added, or undermine the collection of vital foreign intelligence and counterintelligence information. In fact, the Attorney General has consistently said that the bill passed out by the Senate Judiciary Committee struck a good balance. It extended the Patriot Act authorities, but at the same time, it added accountability and civil liberties protections. that I'd refer senators. We had a Senate report in the bill reported about on this. It was Senate Judiciary Committee, Senate Report number 112-13. And I asked that a December 9, 2010 letter from the Attorney General to me making these points be included in the record along with a February 19, 2010 letter from the Director of National Intelligence to House leaders. I asked consent that those be included.
Without objection.
Now, unfortunately, the bill before the Senate today merely extends the expiring authorities to June 1, 2015, and regrettably, these authorities haven't been refined since 2006. If this remains the case, through the extensions that are contemplated by this bill, it means that we'll have 9 years having this bill and we're not able to find any legislative improvements. Well, I think most of us understand we can do better. So the amendment that offering today seeks to improve that, improving the PATRIOT Act, changing the fact that it's gone without these improvements. And I appreciate the efforts made by the majority leader to craft a compromise. I'm sorry that the Republican leadership in the Congress has insisted on an extension of authorities without any improvements. The amendment I have filed and wish to offer along with Senators Paul, Cardin, Bingaman, Kuhn, Shaheen, Wyden, Franken, Gillibrand, Harkin, Durbin, Merkley, Boxer, and Akaka makes significant improvements to current law, promote transparency, expand privacy, civil liberties safeguard. And I ask unanimous consent to place a sectional analysis of the amendment in the record.
Without objection.
Now, one of the improvements Congress should make is to repair a constitutional infirmity in the current law. 3 years ago in Doe versus McCasey, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit found that the nondisclosure provision of the statute authorizing issuance of national security letters was constitutionally defective. We don't make a change that constitutionally defective. Part of the national security letter provision would continue. So part of the comprehensive set of reforms in the bill reported favorably by the Judiciary Committee, I propose a simple statutory fix that would enable the FBI to obtain the information it needs, but at the same time addressing the constitutional concerns. In fact, this proposal has never been controversial. In fact, during the last Congress, Senator Sessions and Senator Bond and the ranking Republicans of the Senate Judiciary and Intelligence Committee co-sponsored a bill that incorporated the very legislative remedy I propose. It's a straightforward matter. It needs to be fixed. The underlying bill does not fix the problem. Our amendment would. I would trust the senators would not want to proceed to vote on an unconstitutional law, one that violates our fundamental charter as a nation and, of course, the liberty of all Americans. No one who claims to honor the Constitution should proceed in so cavalier a fashion. If we're to restore the constitutional underpinning of the NSL authority, then let's adopt this needed improvement. I am also troubled by the Republican leadership's refusal to agree to periodic audits on the use by government, the USA Patriot Act surveillance authorities. When I speak of the leadership, I want to mention that is not a uniform within the Republican Party. There's many Republicans who feel we should have these periodic audits. You know, basic transparency, Mr. President, basic accountability, they're vital to ensure that government does not overstep its legal authority. We give a lot of authorities to our government. We give a lot of things they can do, but we do it usually with a sense that somebody can watch what's going on, that if they overstep the authority, you've got the power to bring them back in line. In fact, it's only because of the audits that are mandated by the 2006 Patriot Act the reauthorization bill, the American public became aware of some of the abuses and misuses of the national security letters, and they were significant. And without that public accountability, without that congressional oversight, I believe the FBI would not have made improvements to a system of tracking NSL issuance. But because of those audits, we are more confident today that FBI agents are following proper procedures for obtaining private information about Americans, rather than properly using exigent letters to circumvent the rules or using Post-it notes to keep track of records. Yet the underlying bill, the one we want to amend, omits audits and public reporting. Our amendment includes important auditing requirements, public reporting to provide accountability and protect Americans' rights. Without the public accountability, I'm not sure what we have. You know, no one can seriously contend that audits by an inspector general of past operations present any operational concerns to law enforcement intelligence gatherers. All it says, it doesn't interfere, but all it says is you got accountability and you have to follow the rules. President, you and I and the 98 other members of this body have to follow the rules. Well, certainly those in law enforcement have to follow the rules. And these have been demonstrated to be vital oversight tools. They should be incorporated. The language in our amendment is a product of more than a year and a half of extensive negotiations with the Republicans, the Democrats, the intelligence community, the Department of Justice. This year, the Senate Judiciary Committee bill won the support of Senator Lee. Last year, a virtually identical bill received the votes of Senators Kyle and Cornyn, was reported favorably by the Senate Judiciary Committee to the Senate. So the bipartisan amendment we filed and we seek to offer is a reasonable package of reforms that preserve the ability of the government to use the PATRIOT Act surveillance tools, but at the same time with transparency and accountability and oversight. It does not make it more difficult for our intelligence authorities, our law enforcement authorities to keep us safe. All it means is that they have to follow the rules that each one of us expect in our own lives. Now, I said often, the Senate should not shirk its duty to re-examine carefully and critically the provisions of the PATRIOT Act and to consider ways to improve the law consistent with our core constitutional principles. That's what I've tried to do. That's what Vermonters expect. I intend to vigilantly guard Americans' privacy and civil liberties while doing all I can to keep all Americans secure. We expect in Vermont, but I have to assume we expect that in the other 49 states. Without a single improvement or reform, without even a word that recognizes the importance of protecting the civil liberties and constitutional privacy rights of Americans, the underlying bill represents a missed opportunity. Let us provide our law enforcement intelligence professionals with the tools they need and give these professionals the security and certainty they need to protect our nation. Let's, at the same time, let's faithfully perform our duty to protect the constitutional principles and civil liberties upon which this nation was founded, on which the American people depend. Mr. President, most Americans, the vast majority, 300 million Americans, are law-abiding, honest men and women. We shouldn't suddenly lump them in a category that they're potential lawbreakers and therefore we can just go ahead and search their homes or their businesses or their personal things without ever telling them and with no proper reason. That, you know, we fought a revolution in this country to stop that from happening. And it's no different today one of the things that's kept us so strong as a nation is we protect the individual rights of all Americans. We can get the lawbreakers. We can get those people, as we did with Osama bin Laden, but we can do it at the same time protecting the principles of our country. It's not to let the terrorists win by making us give up all our own rights and liberties in this country. I mean, they would do that. They could take over. Of course they would. You wouldn't have rights. Certainly women would have virtually no rights. Men wouldn't have many themselves. We're not going to allow that. So the American people expect us to protect our rights and to keep us safe. The amendment can do just that. That's why I hope that people would support the Leahy-Paul amendment, and I suggest the absence of quorum.
Call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work of the chairman of the Intelligence Committee and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee on the Patriot Act, and to state that I'm on an amendment that Senator Leahy has authored, which has bipartisan support. I think that what Senator Leahy's amendment does is to put a couple of checks and balances in this bill that I think are essential, but I really hope that we don't have delays, because delays would cause trouble for our law enforcement people and for the work we are doing to make sure that we continue making progress against those who would harm this country. I fully agree with the statements that we have to balance security and liberty. And I think that the Leahy amendment goes a long way toward that. But again, we need to give law enforcement the tools that they need. Mr. President, as we look at what's ahead for us this week, it is not only the Patriot Act, but we also are going to be looking for votes on a couple of different budget proposals. And I wanted to spend some time talking about the Republican budget that passed the House that was originally authored by Representative Paul Ryan. Now, it sort of got to be known as the Ryan budget, but let's be very clear about this. It's no longer the Ryan budget, it's the Republican budget. This is why I say this. Out of all the Republicans in the House, and there are a lot of them over there, they run the place, you know, well over 100, every one of them voted for this budget except 4, and on our side, not one Democrat. So let's be clear what a budget is. I served on the Budget Committee in the House and in the Senate. A budget is a very important document, whether you write it in your own home for your own family or you write it in the Senate of the United States. Why? Because in a budget, you're looking at all your resources and what your priorities are. And if you've got an issue with spending, which a lot of us have in our homes as well as having it right here, we know that, and certainly in my state, this is when the rubber meets the road and you have to say, what's important to us and what's less important? And the questions that you ask when you write a budget around here is, are our children important? And the answer is yes. Is it important that we have clean air to breathe? For me, absolutely. Should the water be pure? Should we make sure the environment is protected? Yes. Should we have a transportation system so we can move people and goods in this century and be the economic world leader? Yes. That's an investment. And we go through this budget piece by piece by piece, and we decide what is crucial. Of course, we need a strong military. Having said that, you know, some of us believe it's time to wind down the 2 wars that we're in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's costing us $12 billion a month. Mr. President, we can use those funds back home and still keep the kind of counterterrorism forces that we must keep, I believe, in the region, and bring that money home. You know, there's a lot of talk and a lot of words are thrown around about how do you balance a budget. And I have to say that I was fortunate enough to be here, thanks to the good people of my state, during the Clinton years. And we had similar issues. What were the issues? We were running in the red. We had a deficit. We had a debt. And we had to make sure the economy kept growing in a robust fashion. Do you know what we did? We sat around and said, these are the investments that are important to us. Today, I would argue, it's still education, it's infrastructure, it's the environment, it's clean energy. These are the things that will move us forward. And over here are the issues where, you know, we look out and say, how can we get some revenue here? And one of the ways is what the Democrats said the other day. We said it's time to end corporate welfare for the biggest oil companies in the world, who are numbered, listen to this, 2, 3, and 4 on the Fortune 500 and are paying a lower tax rate than a nurse. Can I say that one more time? These big multinational oil companies who are charging us an arm and a leg are paying a higher tax rate than a nurse or a truck driver or a firefighter, an effective tax rate. That's the truth. But yet and still, the power of those special interests just looms over this chamber. And we were not able to end that corporate welfare and start to reduce this deficit. So there are places to go to reduce the deficit. I say start by eliminating corporate welfare for the people who don't need it. Start by asking billionaires and multimillionaires to pay their fair share, and then you don't have to hurt the people of this country, the great middle class of this country, the children. But every day in every way, that's what these battles are about. And so today I want to talk about the Republican budget and just look at it from the standpoint of Medicare and look at it from the standpoint of seniors, and more specifically look at it from the standpoint of women on Medicare who make up, Mr. President, 56% of those on Medicare. Thank goodness the people in this country are tuning in to this debate. They're tuning in. A lot of what we say here just flies over the country and no one really pays attention. It's complex, it's wonky, and the rest. This is an easy one. The Republican budget kills Medicare as we know it. Pretty simple. And people are asking themselves across this nation, do they want to kill Medicare as we know it? And Senator Mikulski, who's just arrived on the floor, has organized the women. And the next 5 minutes, I'll summarize what I said and turn it over to her. The Republican budget is a disaster for seniors, and for those on Medicare, it's worse than a disaster. Newt Gingrich said 15 years ago, let Medicare wither on the vine. That means starving it. The Republican budget just kills it outright. They lost patience with that idea. The Republican House-passed budget brings a devastating cost to seniors for Medicare. And let me show you the cost. Listen to this. Mr. President, the average income of senior women in this country in a year is $14,430. The health care cost that she will have to pay under the Ryan budget is almost all that money, $12,500. So the Ryan Republican budget devastates Medicare and says to a senior woman who makes $14,000 a year that her health care costs are going to cost her $12,000. What's she going to do with the other $2,000? Well, that would be probably, if she's fortunate, maybe 3 months' rent. In California, 1 month's rent. And then what does she do, starve? I'll tell you what she'll do. She won't have health coverage. This is America under the Republican vision, going back to the days where our senior citizens had no dignity. I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. The woman earns $14,000. She's supposed to spend $12,000 on health care. Forget it. She's not going to do it. Who in their right mind would ask a woman, a senior woman, who worked and played by the rules, who more than likely is a widow, who is living off Social Security, who in their right mind would ask her to face double the cost of health care that she now pays? I'll give you the answer. House Republicans. That is what they voted for. I am not making it up. This is what they voted for. And now you got people running away from it, running toward it. They don't know whether to go which way on it. But you know what? When we vote here, I hope they run far away from this, because this is a disaster. Let me show you another chart. This Republican budget ends Medicare as we know it, and it takes the benefit away from the senior and gives it straight to this guy. Who is this guy? He is very happy, and behind him is a chart, healthcare profits. And on the other side, it talks about the CEO of the company and his income. The House Republican budget takes the benefit away from the senior and gives it straight to the insurance company. Imagine. You know what this guy makes, the average CEO of a health insurance company? Mr. President, remember I told you the average woman, a senior woman, makes $14,000 a year? He makes $12.2 million a year. Oh, hooray for the Republicans. They're taking a benefit away from a woman who's lived by the rules, who's raised a family and stood by that family, and in her golden years, they take away her money and they give it to this fat cat over here. Makes me ill. But I better watch out, because the next thing you know, they'll take away my health care, and where will I go? Profits in these companies are up 41% from the previous year. You know, every once in a while, a political party stands for something that shows who they are. And I think we're seeing it here. They voted to continue corporate welfare for the biggest multinational oil companies who are just running to the bank, and their CEOs make more than this guy by a few million. And now, this week, we're voting on their budget, which gives more to the CEO of an insurance company and steals it away from the average senior woman. And the last chart I'm going to show you is this one. There is a health care benefit in place for senior citizens who are on Medicare. By the way, I was very disturbed when we voted for it, because in that bill, at the insistence of the Republicans, we told Medicare they can't negotiate for reasonable drug prices, and that's the way it went down. It was very sad. Having said that, we have a benefit for senior citizens now. And one of the leaders in trying to make sure that they get their full benefit has been Senator Stabenow, who's joining us now. So I'll close with this. What we did in our budget, in our health care reform budget, is to say that seniors will now be covered for basically all of their health care costs. The Republican budget cancels that out, and they now say that seniors have to pay for all of their prescription drugs. Even with their insurance, there will be this period of time, the uncovered benefit called a donut hole. People call it different things. That means that immediately, if the Republican budget passed now, my seniors in California who are in that category getting help on their prescription drugs, 400,000 of them would have to pay $9,000 more over the next decade. $9,000 more for their prescription drugs. Mr. President, I've given you just a bit of the picture of what the Ryan budget does. I've just focused in, really, on the Medicare piece. That whole budget, the Republican budget, started by Ryan, embraced by the Republicans, is a disaster for seniors, for women, for children, and it is a hot time in the old town tonight for big CEOs of health insurance companies. That's what it is. And we should bring it down, and I'm happy to now yield to Senator Mikulski, who will have the time in her own right. Thank you very, very much, Senator Mikulski, for your leadership on this.
Thank you very much, Senator Boxer, for your
Senator from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Boxer, for your steadfast standing up for American women. And today, the Democratic women come to the floor to talk about the terrible impact that the Republican budget coming from the House and getting started in the Senate has on the women. Women, after I speak, will be followed by Senator Stabenow, Shaheen, then Senator Blumenthal. Other colleagues wanted to join us, but Senator McCaskill is in Missouri, as she should be, with her constituents. Feinstein and Klobuchar are chairing hearings. But let me get right to my position. You know, the Republicans, we're not going to call this the Ryan budget, because whether it's the Ryan budget, the Toomey budget, whatever, it is the wrong budget for America, and it continues the radical Republican attack on women that they began in H.R. 1. It started to attack us by taking away our health care, our family planning. Now they're back at it again. The Republican budget takes away our health care, and there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And we're not going to put up with it. No matter what they try to take away from us, we're not going to let it happen. What do I mean by this? Well, let's start with Medicare. Medicare is the single most important health care program in America for seniors. Women are the majority users of Medicare because we live longer. Now, when the Republicans want to talk about taking away or changing Medicare as we know it, what is it that they mean? They're going to take away a guaranteed benefit and convert it into guaranteed profit for insurance companies. They talk about a voucher program. It is a payment for care that doesn't go to a senior but goes to an insurance company. People believe that Medicare should be they go to the doctor that they need, get the prescriptions that their doctors say that they need, and that they have follow-up and consistent care. For no matter what the Republicans say, that this is going to give grandma more choice. More choice to do what? Be at the mercy of insurance company executives that ever shrink a benefit package and ever expand premiums, all of which government subsidizes their profits instead of providing a safety net so that if you're old and sick in America, you get the care that you need, choose the doctor that you want, and get the prescription drugs necessary. Under the Republican budget, federal dollars turned over to insurance companies will make people forced to pay more. In my own home state, it will mean $6,000 more in health care. But they don't stop just at Medicare. They go on to Medicaid. Now, Medicaid sounds like a bad word, or they've made it sound like a bad word, that it's a budget buster. But make no mistake, Medicaid primarily pays for nursing home bills. Nursing home bills for middle-class Americans who needed to turn to nursing home care for a loved one who might have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or Lou Gehrig disease. You don't go into a nursing home because it's a lifestyle choice. It's usually a life-saving mandate in order to do that. And in order to do that, there is no government program to help you. So you have to spend down your life savings to qualify for Medicaid. And then Medicaid will help you pay for those bills. But under the Republican budget, they're going to pull the rug out from anyone who has a loved one in a nursing home. Go out and talk to young families who are part of the sandwich generation, those who are caring for their aged parents and know that they have to make sure they help pay for these long-term care costs while they're worrying about how to send their kids to college. Once more, they're trying to undermine the safety net protections for middle Americans. One thing that the Republican plan does, it is a guaranteed bailout for these insurance companies. Then they go a step even further. And I know my colleagues will talk about what the defunding of health care will do. I want to talk about the defunding of NIH, the cuts to NIH. Now, the National Institutes of Health will also be cut under the Republican assault from women. And what are they talking about? Shrinking NIH. When you shrink the National Institutes of Health, this means there will be setbacks and delays to finding that cure for Alzheimer's, that cure for Lou Gehrig's disease, that cure for Parkinson's disease. Right now, there are 5.5 million people living with Alzheimer's. It is predicted by the year 2050, 50 million Americans will have Alzheimer's. 1.5 million have Parkinson's disease. These aren't numbers and statistics. These are families that need help. Now, they might need help. They certainly need Medicare. They might need long-term care, but they also need to know that their government is on their side. We can race for cures. We can walk for the memory programs for the Alzheimer's Association. We cannot find cures for disease on private philanthropy. And the drug companies are not investing the way they should in finding these new cures. We can't undermine this. So whether you're cutting Medicare, which women need, Medicaid, which is the safety net for nursing home care, and even the research to find the cure for these diseases. Now, who does this affect? It affects people at all ages. It affects constituents of mine who have worked very hard building automobiles and working in steel mills, working in offices, working hard to be good patriotic people. And it goes to even a former member of our Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor, whose husband himself was gripped by Alzheimer's, and one of the reasons she stepped down when she did, because she was going to take care of him. Alzheimer's is an equal opportunity disease. It hits all incomes and all zip codes. But they're going to take a hit because of the Republican budget. We just want to shine the light on this. This is not about a more frugal government. This is not about limited government. This is about government abandoning its responsibility to the American people. And while we're busy promoting democracy over there, let's make sure we continue to provide health care right back here in America. I now yield the floor to a real champion of seniors and women, my colleague, Senator Debbie Stabenow.
Well, thank you so much.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you so much to our Dean of the delegation, our Dean of the Women Senators, who is not only been here the longest, but has been the strongest advocate, the strongest consistent voice for women, for seniors, for children that we have had in our country. And we want to thank you for that. And thank you for bringing us together in your leadership and giving us the opportunity to come and talk about what is very serious ramifications of the budget passed by the House of Representatives. And let me first start. I want to talk about Medicare because that has the biggest impact. But let me say that as we look at the budgets that have been proposed by the House, by House Republicans this year, the current budget, as well as next year's budget that was passed, we are seeing a tax on women and children from prenatal care forward to nursing homes at the end of life. With my hat on as chair of the Agriculture Committee, we oversee the nutrition programs for the country. I was absolutely appalled, Mr. President, that the largest cut that was proposed as we were negotiating the budget for this year in the Department of Agriculture was the WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children, prenatal nutrition for moms who are pregnant, and healthy food for moms and babies as they move forward through their first year of life and beyond. Hard to believe that that would be the #1 cut, the largest cut in the Department of Agriculture budget, but that was the original proposal from this year. Now we go forward and we look at the budget that was actually passed for the coming year by the Republican House, and it's really astounding when we look at the priorities. The Republican budget essentially ends Medicare. It eliminates Medicare as we know it. Now, folks have said to me, oh, no, they don't really mean that. They're not really going to do that. Yeah, they passed that. Not just a proposal that somebody had. They actually passed it as an intact insurance plan. And you know, Mr. President, Medicare has been a wonderful success story for our country. Social Security and Medicare together have been great American success stories, lifting a generation of older Americans, the majority of them women, out of poverty. and allowing them to be healthy longer in life, a generation of people, a generation of women, because the majority of women, particularly as we look at people of older age, the majority of people on Medicare are women. And I think about my own mom at 85 going strong, and the blessing that to watch her on Mother's Day be able to play with my two grandchildren, the most beautiful grandchildren in the world, 3-year-old Lily and 1-year-old Walter, and to have my mother still be healthy because of access to health care at age 85, that's a success story. That's a gift that we've all joined together as a country to give to our families, to older Americans, to our parents and grandparents, and to future generations. That gift would be eliminated, that ability to have Medicare. And most of that elimination would be, unfortunately, an attack on women. Seniors will pay double. The amount they will pay under the plan passed by the House is $6,359 more than they currently pay now. And really, what does that mean? Well, right now, under Medicare, the current system in copays and deductibles and so on, for the average senior is about $6,000, $6,154. Under the Republican plan passed by the House, that would double, more than double. And what does that mean to the average woman who's retired? Well, the average woman, senior, has an income of $14,430. $14,430. And under the Republican plan, her health care costs would be $12,500. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. President, but the idea of living roughly on $2,000 for the year for your rent or mortgage or food or clothing, gasoline, certainly not gasoline given the price of gas, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And this is what is coming for the average woman who's retired over age 65 under the plan passed by the House of Representatives. Now, why would they be doing this? Why would they be doing this? Well, unfortunately, it's to continue to allow them to provide tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans, those earning over $1 million a year, in which they add more tax breaks in the budget while they're cutting Medicare. And it also protects the special perks for special interests, like the oral subsidies. The reality is this. We know that there's a huge budget deficit that we have to tackle. And we understand also that people are living longer and there are things that we need to do both around Medicare and Social Security, and we've already begun that process in health reform, lengthening the solvency of Medicare for a number of years, taking away overpayments for for-profit insurance companies to save dollars and focusing on prevention, which saves $500 billion over the next 10 years in Medicare. Lengthens the trust fund, doesn't cut benefits to seniors. Doesn't eliminate Medicare, doesn't eliminate it as an insurance plan. It strengthens it for the future. That's one way to go. But our colleagues in the other House, our Republican colleagues, have basically said, well, we need to balance the budget, so let's start by eliminating Medicare as we know it. Let's start there. Doubling the cost for the average senior, most of which are women. We've said, well, there's a lot of choices about where to start to balance the budget. Let's start with the top 5 oil companies who are right now earning the largest corporate profits in history for them, and still get taxpayer subsidies, some of which were started almost 100 years ago when it probably made sense, over 100 years ago when oil prices were $17 a barrel. Now they're over $100 a barrel, largest corporate profits ever. They still get taxpayer subsidies. People in my state are scratching their head. They're paying higher prices out of one pocket and the taxpayers subsidizing the profits on the other, out of the other pocket. So let's start with the billions of dollars, certainly no longer needed by an industry doing extremely well, Let's take away those taxpayers with the tens of millions of people who currently get health care through Medicare, most of whom are women. The Republican plan goes even further because it also attacks and dramatically cuts and weakens Medicaid, most of which is for low-income seniors in nursing homes. And 77% of the people living in nursing homes or long-term care facilities are women. So 77% of those in nursing homes or long-term care facilities who are using Medicaid to help them, 77% are women. Again, from prenatal care at the beginning of life to what happens to seniors at the end of life, women in nursing homes, across the board, we are seeing attacks on women's health care. It makes absolutely no sense, Mr. President. It certainly is not the values that I believe in, the values that we believe in as a country. It's certainly not the values that people in Michigan have, I can tell you that. Starting to balance the budget by going back to seniors, going back to women, going back to middle-class families who've already taken hit after hit after hit in this economy is not fair. It's certainly not the place that I'm going to vote to start, or I know that our Democratic majority will start. We're going to have an opportunity very soon in the next day or two to say yes or no about this plan that was passed by the House, this plan that eliminates Medicare as we know it and puts an insurance company bureaucrat back between you and your doctor. Now, every woman on Medicare would be put into a situation where an insurance company bureaucrat would once again be back between she and her doctor as she tries to get the care that she needs. In my judgment, the Republican plan has their priorities upside down. Their plan to eliminate Medicare as we know it is good for insurance companies. There's no question about it. Every single woman would have to go back to a private insurance company, and then the insurance company would get a subsidy at that point. But it may be good for insurance companies, it's bad for seniors, it's bad for taxpayers, and it's certainly bad for American women. I encourage and implore our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join with us in saying no, in supporting Medicare, the great American success story that it is, saying no to the effort to eliminate Medicare as we know it, say no to the Republican budget which puts insurance company bureaucrats between you and your doctor. And let's say yes to other areas where we can reduce the deficit without hurting middle-class families and seniors in this country. It's my great pleasure right now to yield, Mr. President, to a champion for women's health care and for the state of New Hampshire, Senator Jeanne Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you. I want to commend my